So the really great thing about PerfectIt is that it actually doesn't require any training. It's incredibly easy to use. You go to PerfectIt in the ribbon, you click Launch PerfectIt, and then you click that very big Start button. PerfectIt is a consistency checker, so it looks for consistency of capitalization, hyphenation, and other errors. And that can seem complicated, but PerfectIt has an intuitive interface that guides you through that. But like any software checker, not everything that PerfectIt suggests is going to be correct. So the purpose of this training is to show you things to look out for. We're going to use the UK withdrawal agreement from the EU. This is a document that has been subject to all kinds of scrutiny. We're going to give it a different kind of scrutiny today. So the first thing PerfectIt's saying is it's running its check of hyphenation of phrases. And you can see that it's saying a phrase appears with and without a hyphen, and the phrase it's found is case by case. So it's found case by case. It's given us the choice, case by case with hyphens or case by case with spaces. And we can look at the context. And here's a great tip for looking at the context is just to make PerfectIt a little wider so we can see just the full sentences. And what we can see is that in each case, case by case, is before the word basis. So it's being used adjectively, and this is just a straight up inconsistency. And we can see that one with the spaces is wrong. We're going to click fix, and then we're going to move on to the next one. And it says, it's found another phrase with and without a hyphen. So this one is data processing. And looking at those two instances, again, this looks like a straight up inconsistency. There's nothing in the context. It's not a quote. It's not something like that to look for. So it's really just a matter of preference, and I don't know which we'd prefer for this document, but I prefer that with a space, and then click fix. So the next one is dispute settlement, and this really does depend on context. So looking at these, we've got dispute settlement procedures, and that's the adjectival use, so we'd expect a hyphen. But in other places, we've got a noun, and we've got headings. Let's fix the adjectival ones. Let's leave those headings, and then let's make the noun have a space so everything is consistent. And we've looked at a lot of these hyphens now, so I'm going to jump ahead and look at PerfectIt's next check. And so the first one was hyphenation of phrases. The next one is hyphenation of words. So it's looking not at a space, but looking for closed versus a hyphen. This seems to be a straight up inconsistency. Words even signaling that could be it's more likely to be a spelling error. So we're going to click fix on that one. And now here we've got an interesting one because we've got cooperation of the OECD, with cooperation having a hyphen. And then we have no hyphen in all these other instances of the word cooperation. So here we've got, potentially it could be a mistake, but what we're seeing is that they've been quite intentional with the use of the word cooperation. And actually, this is a name, and it's a name of a well-known body. So I'm not going to check it up now, but it seems quite likely that that's intentional. We could, go to the website, double check and make sure. But I'm going to just leave that one and assume that this is in fact a false positive. Again, jumping ahead because we've seen quite a lot of hyphens. The next check is between n dashes and hyphens, and n dashes and spaces. Neither of those come up with any errors, so PerfectIt's gone straight through those. Now it's looking for spelling variations. So is a word done with the US preference, US spelling in one place, UK spelling in another. And the first one it's found is benefited with the double T's and single T's. And unless that's a quote, those really don't belong in the same document. For EU documents, a single T is preferred, but for argument's sake, let's do a double T and click fix. And then the next one is combating, again, single T versus double. Let's make double T the preference here again and click fix. And now we've got harmonization with an S in one place, a Z in the other place. And we can see that in most of the locations they've gone with the S, so that's probably the preference here. I'm going to click fix on these two exceptions. And we see many more words spelled one way, not another. We're going to go on, just click next and on to the next check now. So let's go on to the next check, and this is PerfectIt's check of numbers in sentences. So just looking in the middle of sentences are words spelled out in one place, but digits in another. And PerfectIt, knows some of the context. It's not going to show you every single number that appears in a document, not even every number in the middle of a sentence, because it knows that words like chapter or appendix or dates will naturally have numbers in them. But it's highlighting some things that might be wrong. And looking at all of these, if our preference between 1 and 10 is for words to be spelled out, we can see that this is applying to articles, again applying to articles. I'm not entirely sure what this is applying to, but it looks very intentional, and CO2 is probably not how we would do that, but we could jump into the document, we could correct that if we want, and then switch back, but we're not going to change that number. And now it moves on. First it did 1 to 10, then it does 11 to 20. And here it's found some inconsistencies. So we've got 12 months, which is spelled out in these locations, but we've got 12 yearly instruments, 11 installments, 15, and these are all in digits. So I'm going to suggest that the 12 months is probably an error. And I'm going to click Fix, and now between 11 and 20, our numbers are consistent. So PerfectIt has a check for common typos. It's looking for embarrassing mistakes that are easy to make, and what it's found is it's false positive. It's found the word turnover. It's worried that you might mean the verb. Very simple mistake to make, especially because it's to turnover. But in this case, it's a reference to a specific kind of tax, so we're just going to click Next and ignore PerfectIt's suggestion on that one. And now it's looking at abbreviations. So PerfectIt scans a document, it does the best it can to figure out where every abbreviation is in a document, and then it tries to link those to the definition. And once it's linked them to the definition, there's a lot of useful information it can tell you. And what it's found here is an abbreviation is used before the definition. They've found a definition, OECD, and it's been defined as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, but it's actually used 1, 2, 3 times before it's defined. So the right way to do that is actually to define it the first time. So we're going to click Fix on that one. And then by the 4th time it appears, actually you can just click Fix, and it doesn't need to be defined later on. The next check it does is for abbreviations defined twice. So really easy mistake to make. Different people working on different parts of a document comes together, and those people who each defined terms carefully, suddenly it doesn't look like it's written as a whole. And what we can see here is that base erosion and profit sharing comes up on page 287, and then actually it's defined again on page 412. So we're going to click Fix. So here we have the Secure Information Exchange Network Application, Sienna, and it's defined on page 87, and then it's defined again on page 91. That second one we can just click Fix and clear that right up. Speed through the rest of these. The next check is maybe the most important check of abbreviations. This is, has an abbreviation been used and then not defined? And that might be intentional. There are certain abbreviations that are just going to be known by readers, but there are also many instances where an abbreviation is just not defined through laziness or it's just been missed. And of course those are extremely confusing for readers. So it's found quite a few of these, and just scanning down that list, we can see that some of those are quite recognizable, and I can imagine that in a EU document, EEC might not need a definition. But whatever a flag T is, I'm going to suggest that's, for a document this important, this public, probably needed some kind of definition. In the next check, PerfectIt's looking, are any abbreviations spelled out in full even after they've been defined? It's found the Employment and Support Allowance as the ESA, and then the Employment and Support Allowance spelled out in full anyway. This looks like it could be some kind of reference, so maybe that's okay and we don't need to fix that. It's found the European Central Bank, defined as we already saw on page 153, and then all these locations in which European Central Bank is written out in full. And we could go through these and we could check, like maybe in the headers it's fine, but that one we want to click Fix. And that one we want to click fix. And that one we want to click fix. So we could go through and we could keep on checking those. I'm just going to skip ahead and skip on to the next. Many of these clearly in this document, but skipping ahead, now it's looking for abbreviations used only once. So a term that's been defined, and here we have African, Caribbean, and Pacific, ACP, but ACP isn't actually used anywhere else in the document, so that doesn't make much sense. We're going to go into that, just make a quick change there, and then go on and click next. And the next check that PerfectIt's doing is capitals in phrases. So has a word been capitalized in one place, not in another? And there's lots of reasons why that could be intentional. So it's kind of the specific versus the general rule. So a government or a university as opposed to the government of or the university of. We can see there's a lot. We're still only on the A's, and we've got an annex, and this annex, so we've got these ones are all specified with a number, but very easy to make a mistake. So when it says this annex here and this annex sets out, one of these two is clearly wrong, and it looks like overall we're using capitals, so it looks like that's the mistake, and we can just quickly click fix there and go on to the next one. And again, lots of these things to inspect. I want to find a sort of longer one. But Common Agricultural Policy shouldn't be both lowercase and uppercase. So we're going to click fix on those ones. And then I'm just going to jump ahead because there are clearly a lot of these. I'm going to jump right the way to the end, just a check for comments left in the text. So comments left in the text, PerfectIt's looking for those little NBs, those little add in here, anything that might signify a mistake. And it's interesting to see what it's come up with, which is that Annex X is often a holder, of course, for annex to be named. But just looking at the context here, I can see Annex X is Annex 8 is a Roman numeral, so 10 is almost certainly something that exists, and there hasn't been a major gap here. But still a very useful check just to make sure that nothing is left in. And then finally, PerfectIt ends with finalization tasks. Many of these could be completed just through Word anyway, but it's great to have that reminder. So it gives you a chance to convert 2 spaces to 1 or more document formatting errors. And then PerfectIt has its reports. Especially useful there is the table of abbreviations. We're just going to run that, and if you compare the idea of going through and trying to create a table of abbreviations manually with how quickly that just happened and how fast PerfectIt is at doing it, you can see there's a real sort of time saving there. So that completes PerfectIt's scan. There's just a few other sort of tips and tricks that might show at this stage. We could jump back, and let's jump back to the check of hyphenation. And we already looked at this one, so let's skip forward. End user. Now what we might do here is we might decide that actually we don't want to look at this in a consistency way. We always have a preference, and that preference might be that we always want end user to be hyphenated. So if that was the case, we could use the customize menu, and we could build in an always prefer end user with the hyphen. And what that does is that means we start building a PerfectIt style sheet of preferred terms. So it's not just a consistency checker. We can start to use it to enforce house style. And we can go further with that. We can start editing those styles. We're not going to cover that here, but there are 10 video tutorials covering all the ways you can build in your own preferences into PerfectIt. Or we could use the built-in styles. So you can see a sort of list, and actually there is an EU style already built in. And if we run that, we might find additional preferences. So I'm just going to repeat this check and see if building the EU's own preferences on top of it will find more examples. And immediately it does so. The EU has a preference for case law to be with a hyphen rather than a space, and we could go through and we could just start clicking fix on all of these because we have that preference. I hope that shows how easy it is to use PerfectIt. If you haven't tried it yet, there's a free trial available from intelligentediting.com.